I am Dr. S. Viveka, Professor, Department of Information Technology, Vellalar College of Engineering and Technology. Today I am going to take the topic transaction in database management systems. So let us know what is a transaction. So what is a transaction in your database, or what is a transaction in your bank? You are doing some action in your database, that is called transaction. So let us get into the topic. So these are all the outline. So these are all the outline we are going to discuss today, that is transaction concept and transaction states, and you are going to have some concurrent executions on the transactions and how you are going to achieve that concurrency in your transactions. Okay. So let us begin the topic. What is a transaction? So transaction is a unit of execution that access and possibly updates various data items in your database. So in our day-to-day life, we are going to have a lot of work on our database, and every updation or every deletion or what the thing you are modifying in your database is going to called as a transaction. Here we are taking an example of work that is happens in your bank. So this is an better example to understand the concept transaction is quickly and easily, and it is a very important topic. Okay. So we are going to deal two important issues in your transaction. One is we are going to handle some failures. There are also many failures while doing some transactions in your database. That is, transaction means here the database updation or modification are called as a transaction in your database, and you are going to do some concurrent execution, because suppose if in your take that your bank as an example, suppose one customer has to work on a particular time, means that is not possible to satisfy all the customers. So you have to go for concurrent execution. So how concurrent executions are happens in your database is also comes under transactions. Okay. So transaction is a unit of program that in execution. So here an example program you are going to have, that is it is going to the 6 lines of transaction. What it going to do in your database means it going to debit 50 from the account A, and it going to update that 50 into account B. So what happens inside, or what are all the things we have to follow while you are going to make the transaction in your database? So these are all the properties and these are all the work your database concurrent manager or transaction manager has to ensure each and every transaction. First one is atomicity. So before going to see what is an atomicity or what are all the properties of transaction, let me explain one concept. Okay. So just understand it, and then we can come to that properties of transaction. For an example, suppose if I am going to transfer an amount to you. Okay. So what happened if the transaction stops in between? Suppose if the bank debits amount from my account and it is not credited in your account, what will happen? I am going to lose my amount in my account, and you are not going to update that amount. So what will happen in your database? You are going to have some inconsistent data. We have to avoid all these things, so that we are going to have a first property, that is atomicity. So every transaction has to complete fully, or we are going to have roll back everything. Okay. So we are not going to have any updation on our database. Okay. Suppose if the transaction is not completed, we are not going to have any updation, and then isolation, and then we are going to come for isolation, because we are going to have many transactions going to be executed at the same time. So each and every transaction should be executed individually. Okay. So that happens, or that will comes under isolation. We will see later how we enable isolation in our database. And consistency. So we are going to have lot of transaction in every second in our database, and we have to maintain the consistency of our database. Consistency is that the state it has to maintain. Okay. And durability. Suppose we are going to have lot of failures, like natural failures like power failure and internet failure, or there may be some mistakes in our program. Okay. So that also should not affect the database consistency. So these are all the properties that we have to maintain. So first one is atomicity, consistency, isolation and durability. So these are all the important properties of every transaction, or these properties has to satisfy while we are going to make a transaction in our database. Here the transaction is we are going to what the thing which we are going to add or delete or modification in our database. So, required properties of the transaction that we already discussed. Sir, so these are all the transaction states. Okay. So, transaction states is active, partially committed, failed or aborted and committed. So, sir next. So, these are all the diagram or these are the state diagram of transaction. So, every transaction is in active state while it starts and it going to either partially committed, okay, or it comes to failed and it goes for aborted. Okay. So, partially committed transaction may end with successfully end has to completed with committed statement or otherwise it comes to the failed state. Okay. So, fail here we are going to make two decision whether you are going to abort the transaction or you are going to restart the transaction. Yeah.